Dune Awakening fully released on June the 10th. It was met with pretty big success, with nearly 190,000 peak players that Sunday. A few weeks later, achieving over 1 million unique players. However, it does not come without its issues. Bugs, exploits, griefers, and overall players just losing things when they really shouldn't have. And there are still bugs the devs haven't addressed, with hackers still doing some awful things. Like, this is pretty horrendous and should be put to an end immediately. So I want to have a look at some data that comes directly from Steam that can lead to a bunch of misconception with regards to players thinking the game is doomed. And yes, it does look bad, going from 190,000 to just 70,000. Now, just to preface this, I don't think it really matters that the game has a lot of players. And in fact, the more players that play the game, the worse off it is for you. It will just mean more people stealing your resources that you otherwise could have gotten. However, in terms of an update thing, the more players who buy the game and download it, the more likely we'll get bigger updates in the future. So I pulled the data from the Steam charts. This shows the numbers a little bit better and we can get a better average of the amount of players that play every day. And when you look at the fact that yes, they had 1 million players back when they announced this on June the 24th. You can see at that date, they had a peak player count of 132,000. However, we need to find the average, not peak. Therefore, we look at the second column, we add up everything across these times and get the average amount, because you have to keep in mind what this shows on the top of this graph is peak concurrent player. So the number of individuals actively playing the game at the exact time. You cannot say there are 189 people playing at every moment throughout the entire day. That would mean there's exactly 189 players. But we all gotta sleep, we all take breaks, and majority of you will go to work and only play a few hours in the evening. And this few hours in the evening is not going to align with everybody. Therefore, you might have like 100,000 at 2 a.m., only 60,000 at 10 a.m., and 130,000 at 7 p.m. So the average at this date was actually 93,000. If we have a total reported million players on June the 24th, with then 93,000 average concurrent players, we can see the average amount of playtime those players had. Nearly 2.5 hours. Of course, some of them are going to download the game, install it, check it out for 10 minutes and delete it immediately. Others download it, install it and play for 10 hours straight. But the average seems to be about 2.5 hours. Then we'll have a look at the Great Decline. We go all the way down to July the 19th. Only 68,000 at peak. A massive drop from, yes, June the 15th, 1 month prior. But if we say we didn't really lose any players or gain any players since then, and when we look at these numbers, the dates, the exact average amount of players that played on that date, for some reason they have a lot more time slots here, but we get 47,600 average players. That is again average concurrent players playing at the exact same time. We then see the average playtime has dropped to just over 1 hour. Now honestly, this is to be expected, even myself included. I don't really play a whole lot more than that. There just isn't so much to do, and I guess I've lost a bit of motivation. I more so play on the weekends with like my girlfriend, rather than every day for multiple hours like I did back when the game actually launched. However, you can argue people have quit the game and there's probably less than 1 million players who actually play every day. Yes, that could totally be the case. We may have lost even half the players. However, you have to keep in mind, if that's the case, then people play still for over 2 hours per day. And I honestly don't think that's correct. I would assume people on average will just be playing the game less. The hype is subsiding and people have experienced most of the game already by now if they've been playing since the start. There will of course be newer players joining and older players just taking their time. And that's what is still going to make up like this million player count. So even with an average concurrent player base of just 47,000, you can still have a player base that is of substantial size. It's just that everybody plays a bit less than at launch. You might even be more doom and gloom and say 75% of the player base have quit, but that would just leave an unreasonable amount of over 4.5 hours that the average player would have to play for. And if 90% of the player base quit, you'd have to play for over 11 hours. The average player, imagine playing that much? No way. What this concludes is this graph's a little bit misleading. It can lead players to thinking the game's doomed, that nobody's playing it anymore, that so many have quit, when in reality, the most likely scenario is everybody's just playing it a bit less. Now, a big reason why everybody would play it less is because this is not your standard MMORPG. I would rate it far more similar to a game like Valheim. You have other games too, like Minecraft and Enshrouded, all these survival crafter games. And yes, Dune Awakening was somewhat advertised as an MMO where you could have lots of players, particularly in the deep desert, messing around and contesting each other over node points and spice. However, the reality sets in and yes, there's a bit of that, but most players are not finding that enjoyable content whatsoever. It rather falls flat from what the hype may have been. You look at those trailers where lots of people would group up to farm spice, and yes, that can happen in some part, but it's always generally very small scale. Additionally, the game does not really promote group play whatsoever. The more people who actually play, the worse off you are as an individual. Because it's a survival crafter, you need all these resources to craft these things, and the more people who are online contesting you to gather those resources, the worse it is for you. Again, that's particularly prevalent when you go to the deep desert, farming Clastanium and the spice. So what happens in pretty much all of these survival crafters, people will play the game, they will enjoy it to the fullest when it releases, when they actually play it. But it's not the type of game to retain a ton of players over time because of the nature of the content. You unlock the tiers, you gather those materials, and you craft the next things to work towards then the next tier, and so on. And the tiers are not endless. The game is very much definitive, and you will reach a point where you have got pretty much everything and you're satisfied. And at that point, yes, you just go on and you play a different game. The devs have said it themselves. If you are satisfied and completed the content, you can leave the game and come back when there's a new update. I had a lot of you coming, you can't leave the game because your base and taxes and all that. And yes, it completely sucks having your base and all your work completely destroyed. I like it where I can just log into Minecraft or Valheim and even 10 years later still be able to play that base I built ages ago. So in that way, Dune Awakening could do with having a single player aspect of this game, to be able to preserve that base building. Nobody wants to spend 100 hours in a base and then have it destroyed because they wanted to take a break from the game, like an actual break, not logging back in every few weeks. But there's no denying, this game has issues. The devs seriously need to get working on fixing them ASAP. Players will quit over them. In my experience, I've never ran into any hackers. I only got killed twice in PvP, and I've pretty much unlocked everything in the game, bar some unique schematics. I'm pretty satisfied as a solo player. I had a ton of fun playing this game. I don't really like the deep desert, but the base game, Haga Basin, is really great. And it's one of the best survival crafter games I've played. But it will not sustain a player base like an MMORPG. There's just not nearly enough content for that. And the game is simply not designed for it either. It is not designed to retain players. There's no matchmaking, no instance dungeons, no PvP battlegrounds. The game is simply not that type of game. At its core, it's a survival crafter. There is a definitive end once you have pretty much crafted everything. The only options is messing around in PvP and base building. Base building is going to be the core thing that causes players to stick around. There are a ton of different possibilities what you can do with all the different base building sets. But of course, you always have to keep in mind, if you do quit the game, it is not an offline game, so your progress and work will decay over time. If you don't pay your taxes, you don't keep your shields up, your base will disappear. Again, I don't think there's a whole lot less players actually playing the game. I just think the majority don't play as long. Even if we did lose half the player count, this would mean the average player plays longer than when the game released, which doesn't make sense. Player reviews has been dropping. It started out as very positive, over 80%, and has gone down to 75%. I am very much led to believe this is as a result of the end game. It's very unsatisfactory going into the deep desert versus Haga Basin. And the majority of players who would have started this game would be PvE survival crafter fans. If you did not enjoy survival crafting, it's highly unlikely you would have stuck around long enough to get to the deep desert. And therefore, the majority don't exactly enjoy PvP, particularly forced PvP. So once again, thanks for watching. A special thank you to the support of my channel members, and we'll see you guys around. Goodbye for now.